Clemson has taken the gloves off in their legal fight against the ACC.
You are Locked On ACC, your daily podcast on the Atlantic Coast Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Shout out to the Everydayers for making Locked On ACC your first listen and your first watch today. I'm Alex Donno from Locked On Canes. He is Kenton Gibbs from Locked On Wolfpack. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Monopoly Go. This fast-paced game lets you team up with friends for tournaments to unlock awesome prizes like unique stickers for trading, cool playing pieces, and hilarious emojis for taunting your friends. So download Monopoly Go, now free on Google Play or the App Store. Game on. Kenton, you've kept asking, when are we going to find out more about the Clemson lawsuit against the ACC? I feel like someone must be watching this show in the in the courts of South Carolina, because we did get a leak today on an amended complaint filed by Clemson in their lawsuit against the ACC. Now, apparently, this complaint was filed in the middle of April, I believe April 17th, but it was just revealed to us on Thursday. And so if we take a look at this, Clemson is actually seeking unspecified damages against the ACC, says the league slandered Clemson's title. So Clemson seeks damages. This is from the amended complaint and a declaration from this court that the media rights Clemson granted to the ACC do not include any Clemson games that are played after Clemson ceases to be a member of the ACC. Clemson is not required to pay the ACC the withdrawal penalty, as such a payment is unenforceable penalty in violation of public policy. Clemson owes no fiduciary duties to the ACC or its other members and has breached no legal duty or obligation it might owe the ACC by filing this lawsuit. Clemson has no joint venture relationship with the ACC and other member institutions of the ACC. Clemson is entitled and has not waived in any way its full right to sovereign immunity on any claims by the ACC with respect to the agreements and activity at issue. So now all of this, Kenton, is built on the premise of, and we'll see how the courts interpret the ACC's grant of rights if it even gets that far. Clemson's assertion is that once they leave the conference, the ACC does not own their future media rights until 2036, where the ACC's assertion is, absolutely we do. That's in the grant of rights that you signed.
This is getting so tiresome. Give me the discoveries. I don't want to hear nothing else. I don't want to hear who does or does not. What does the contract say? I know many of our listeners are old enough to remember, what does the Fox say? Well, I want to know what the contract says. Okay? I'm tired of hearing, well, this was or was not specified. Well, this was. Listen, at the end of the day, it either is in the contract or it isn't. Let's get to that part. Can we skip to the good part? Can we skip to that part of this deal? Because right now it just feels like, well, I'm going to throw a jab out at you. Oh, you slandered our name and made it hard for us to find a new conference. You mean they made it hard for you to be tampered with? Is that? Yeah. Oh, they made it hard for you to break the law. Oh, look at that. Oh, these teams are trying to leave and they're trying to say they have no fiduciary responsibility. If the language isn't in the contract, ACC, it's not in the contract.
Yeah.
Sorry to tell you. I hate it for you if you left that important part out of the contract. It's like making your partner sign a prenup that has nothing to do with if they leave you, they're not allowed to take thing X, Y, and Z. It's just like, oh, well, it's a Ozzy Osbourne style prenup. You can't die before me, and that's it. Everything else, if you decide to leave me, half is yours, 3/4 is yours, as much as you can take is yours, but just don't die for me. Yeah, what's the point? Right? Like, this is,
right.
At some point in time, show me the contracts, show me what's in the contract, because I'm tired. I'm tired of hearing about it. I'm tired of going back and forth about it. I'm tired of it. Yes, it gives us good content to talk about, but for Christ's sake, what is in the grant of rights? Spill the beans. Spill the beans. Because you and I both know this is about survival for the ACC. This is not about whether or not the ACC wants people to think they do good business. Perception doesn't matter as much as you live it. Okay? That's the God's honest truth. So with that being said, show us the grant of rights, show us what's in it, so we can cut through the BS. We can cut through, save millions of dollars in legal fees just to say this is in there. Sorry to tell you, that's what's written in it. So
the lawyers must love this. They keep racking up those billable
absolutely.
hours.
Absolutely.
So this is another bit from John Blau, who covers Clemson for the Post and Courier, a newspaper in South Carolina. He says Clemson accuses the ACC of making knowingly false statements about the grant of rights. And that's why Kenton is rightfully saying, can we just see it? So they're accusing the ACC about making knowingly false statements about the grant of rights, saying the ACC made those statements, quote, to harm Clemson and deter its exit from the conference by, among other means, seeking to diminish the value of Clemson's intangible property. So basically scaring other conferences from wanting to add Clemson. And this would apply to Florida State, who's also suing the ACC, and it would apply to every member of the ACC, that other conferences would be afraid to make a bid because if they don't own the media rights, then there's not much point in adding that team to your conference. The ACC has they did reveal in one of those hearings against Florida State that they would be willing potentially to sell the media rights. Now, I don't think they would sell it at a cut rate. They would probably demand such a high dollar figure that it might be cost prohibitive for whoever wanted to add those teams. So Clemson is basically saying, you guys are using scare tactics to make us less attractive for another conference. Now, a couple things on that, people may argue this point, but isn't that basically Clemson saying that we have a right to explore other conferences despite being a contractual member of the ACC? And technically, if you are exploring other options, you're in breach. So, or maybe they're just saying hypothetically, when we do leave, we're not attractive to other conferences. But it does sound like a possible breach and possible tampering going on.
Again, I don't understand what the argument is here. And I'm willing to bet dollars to donuts. And by the way, I don't know if y'all know this or not, but, for many states, Krispy Kreme got a promotion going on right now. If you just sign up for the app, you get a free dozen. But that's neither here nor there. I'm willing to bet dollars to donuts here that the reality of this is very simple, okay? If the argument is, well, they wouldn't let us look for another conference or they would make it tough for us to look for another conference based on language that is in the contract, the judge is going to send them back to get their edits and revision in too. The reasoning may be slightly different from that of Florida State's case, but Florida State's case was said in plain English. This one will be, hey, that doesn't make a lot of sense. That doesn't really fly in the face of reality. So go back and come on back and we'll try it again and we'll go from there. Because again, I don't see a world where it makes that much sense. If you don't know for 100% fact, if it is factually proven that it's in the contract that, hey, you cannot go anywhere, and even if you were to leave, they still own your media rights, then what argument is there for the extra damages?
Right.
That argument then becomes null and void to say, well, you don't own us, and you would tell people that you do if we leave, but in fact, they do own those rights. It's again, all of this stuff, it's very dramatic. It's very drawn out. It's very General Hospital. It's just General Hospital, South Carolina. This is, I want to see, give me the information. Show me exactly in the grant of rights where it says we own your media rights through da-da-da-da-da, through the duration of da-da-da-da. If it's in there, it's in there. And if it's not, you left a big loophole. You left a huge hole in your defense, and now people are going to take advantage of it.
And how unclear could that language possibly be?
Exactly.
How much room to it? If they say we own your media rights until 2036, if they don't include the words continuously or in perpetuity, or then if it leaves it open to interpretation where we don't actually own your future games, then that's a really bad job by whoever drew up that grant of rights. But we will find out. Also on this episode, do want to talk about potential award winners this coming season in ACC football. Who's the offensive player of the year going to be? Who's the defensive player of the year going to be? And is the ACC going to produce a finalist for the Heisman Trophy, possibly even a Heisman winner this year? But meanwhile, the ACC is fighting court battles on multiple fronts, right? They're fighting Clemson in North and South Carolina, and they're fighting Florida State in Florida and North Carolina. And something new came out of their legal battle with Florida State that I think is worth talking about, because Kenton, it supports something that you've been saying on recent episodes. So again, not ready to take a victory lap just yet for you, but we seem to be trending in that direction. So you want to keep it locked right here on this brand new episode of Locked On ACC. And I already know you're keeping it locked to eBay Motors. My goodness, guys, passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you will always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time and your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers. Thank you so much for making Locked On ACC your first listen and your first watch today. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? You have to turn down the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel with It's programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Alex Donno from Locked On Canes with Kenton Gibbs from Locked On Wolfpack. Kenton, this was Chris Nee at Florida State 24/7 had this nugget earlier today. You remember earlier this month or last month, it's May already, really? Early last month in April, Florida State and the ACC had a hearing in Florida, and the judge, he ordered mediation. And he wants mediation within the next 120 days or 120 days from that ruling. Now, being ordered into mediation, like it forces both sides to try and talk it out and try to settle it out of the courts. It doesn't force you to come to a resolution, though. So right. Like once they go to mediation, that doesn't mean it's not going to see a jury or that there won't be discovery. It just means the judge wants them to try and hash it out and I guess not waste any more of the court's time and money. But I'm not seeing, at least not yet, too many positive signs that the mediation is going to be smooth and swift. Okay, Kenton. So it was April 22nd was when the court ordered the parties to mediate within 120 days. And the ACC and Florida State have actually they filed a joint motion to extend the deadline for the selection of a mediator. So they were supposed to find a mediator within 10 days or by Thursday, May 2nd. But the parties have not been able to select a mediator yet, given the complexity and magnitude of the issues presented in this case. Nee writes, they wish to devote more time to the careful selection of an appropriate mediator. The parties reasonably believe that an extension of 60 days will provide adequate time. Wherefore, the parties respectfully request a 60-day extension of the current deadline to inform the court of the parties' selected mediator through Monday, July 1st, 2024. Wait, so hold on, Kenton. If they don't select a mediator until July 1st of 2024, does that mean we're not going to have an ACC collapse by June 30th, 2024, as you predicted we would not see?
Well, now, Donno, I was told under good authority that Florida State had played its last game in the ACC. I was told that multiple times. I was called everything but a child of God when I said, Florida State's leaving soon, but they're not leaving that soon. They have not played their last game in ACC.
Because we all agree they're leaving eventually. We just don't think it's happening within a year. Yeah.
Absolutely. I know they're leaving early. 2026, very different conversation. 2030, if they're not going yet, I'd be shocked. No kidding. I am just so appalled here that there's an extension in this case to the first. And correct me if I'm wrong, Donno, but Florida is where the case looks most favorable for Florida State, doesn't it? That's the case that if there is one that's going to get them the result of them being absolved of all ACC stuff, that's the Florida one. And that one.
Home court advantage, as they say.
And that one now has a date of July 1st. Well, Donno, you told me right last time when you said, don't high step yet until we get there. But this does sure seem like a moment, doesn't it? Doesn't it? But in all seriousness, this mediation thing is just another moment where you could tell this is getting uglier than the Drake and Kendrick Lamar beef. This is headed to a very, very nasty place. They can't even agree on a mediator. What are we doing here? Like, this isn't, like you said, mediation doesn't guarantee that both sides have to come to an agreement. It's literally just sit down in the room and talk. Sit down in the room and see if there can be some reach. And you can say, hey, this is what we want. Hey, this is what we want. You're not being reasonable. You're not being reasonable. Okay, let's get up and walk away from the table. Hey, judge, we tried. Mediation was tried. Didn't work. Oopsie daisy. Like, we can't even agree on somebody to do that. This thing is ugly. This has gotten to the point where it's like your hair is whack, your face is whack, your contract is whack, your school is whack, your conference is whack, everything about you is whack. It's getting to that moment where it's just like, we don't like anything about each other fundamentally, and so we're going to give each other as hard of a time as possible about every single little detail possible, where it's like, what do you really gain from this?
And I wonder what a successful mediation would look like, because, I don't think it's impossible that, the ACC would agree to some kind of a settlement that would allow Florida State, and then, maybe they come to a similar settlement with Clemson where they allow them to leave the conference. But that's such a slippery slope for the ACC, because they would need to find a way to allow those teams to, because they want out so badly, right? That Clemson and Florida State, they want out so badly, to allow them to leave your conference, but in a way that doesn't completely blow the dam. Right. Because they're not the only teams that want to leave, Kenton. I mean, there's been a lot of smoke about UNC, Virginia. There's
Miami is one that we've heard a lot
about. We think, I mean, they've never said it publicly, but there's definitely been a little bit of buzz there. So the ACC needs to make sure that they so carefully allow them to settle and leave that it doesn't just create a giant loophole for 3 or 4 other schools to follow. Because if that were to happen, the ACC might literally collapse, as people have suggested.
Oh, absolutely. And again, I keep trying to tell people that I believe that the most likely situation was a buyout of about $300 million or so, $250 million or so. That, again, most schools just don't have to pony up. Most schools just don't have that. Right. And so it's like saying, hey, buying a house as a millennial is easy, okay? All you need to do is get a job at your dad's firm that's going to pay you about $250,000 a year, and stay with your parents in their nice house where you get your own separate guest house. And when you can do those two things, of course you can buy a home as a millennial. What are you doing? Why are all of you so broke and not knowing how to buy a house? It's that type of deal where it's like, well, if that's the settlement, I don't think it really creates a large lane for everybody to leave. However, the longer that these cases go on, and I know people are going to say I'm biased here, but the more it seems like if I'm the ACC, I'm not settling a damn thing. Come see me. Come see. Because it just seems to me like these cases are flimsier than even I'd imagined to begin with. And I'm looking for an area where I can say this is pliable for these teams. And it seems to me like these teams are going to lose and are going to have to sit still until they can pay the payout later on down the road, which will be less than what it is now, but it still will be a substantial amount.
Yeah, because if they were to have to pay like 250, this is hypothetical numbers, but if it were like a $250, $300 million payout, like I would also like to know who's funding that, right? Is that coming from, from the TV network of your future conference, which then it would only really make sense if it's the Big Ten and Fox.
I was just about to say, because then you get into some legalese with
because if ESPN, who also has the ACC rights, foots the bill to buy you out to put you in the SEC, that seems like a gigantic conflict of interest there. So it would have to be Fox, and then or would it be like private donors who step up, like boosters from those schools? Because one thing I will say, Kenton, is you got to keep in mind these are both public universities. Clemson is a public university in South Carolina. Florida State is public in Florida. I know we've already seen evidence of state attorney generals and government officials getting involved, but I mean, God forbid any of this comes from tax money, okay? Because I am not for that. Like Florida State, I will support you to a certain point. Like I don't care if you're in the ACC or not, really, but I would care if you're using, as a resident of Florida, if you're using my tax dollars to get out. That's where I draw the line.
Oh, absolutely. I'm a firm believer, and this is something that many people disagree with me on, but again, nobody has shown me empirical data to tell me I'm wrong. The reality for me is this simple. If you are going to be using that amount of money to buy new facilities, new whatever, you need to show me something to say that you are so behind that's what's keeping you from getting championships. Because if you look at the teams that have the most expensive facilities in America, the championships don't line up with that. Oregon would never lose a game if facility price was all that went into or was a major contributor.
Auburn would never lose a game either.
They would never. They would never. They surely wouldn't be getting beat down by old New Mexico State, which they did in Jordan-Hare last year. There are things that go into winning that go so far beyond that. And I'd even argue that there's a direct inverse relationship after a certain number. Because after a certain point, you're no longer attracting real ball players. You're no longer attracting guys who do it for the love of the game, who do it because it means everything to them. You're attracting a certain type of guy when you've got a lazy river in the middle of your football facility. You're attracting a certain type of guy with that. I don't even want – I'm sorry to tell you. I don't even want the word lazy nowhere around my program. What the hell would I have a lazy river for in the middle of my damn football facility? But again, people don't want to hear that. They want to hear, well, we don't want to get left behind. Well, Mississippi State is going to have nicer facilities done. And what about it? Well, Vanderbilt's going to have nicer facilities. More power to them. How's that worked out for them? You know, like at a certain point in time, it needs to be acknowledged that it is so if you are going to use tax money for this, you are going to see people up in arms in a way that you have not in quite some time, because it's like go look at Clemson's facilities. What more could you need as a player? What more could you need?
Oh, they have outstanding facilities there.
Florida State's facilities. What more could you need? I have never in my life heard a player say, "Yeah, Florida State was just the pits, man." Oh my God, I saw it.
And I think they're renovating their stadium with tax money, which again, like I don't know how I feel about that, but
and here's the thing, right? This isn't because he's a Miami guy and I'm an NC State guy. If NC State said, "Hey, we're going to collect $300 million of taxpayer money to pay to get out of the ACC," I'm saying the same thing. With all due respect to all of them, I love Thunder. I love Coach Doran. Boo Corrigan, I don't know the man, but he's done a hell of a job as the AD. With all due respect, I'm not telling anybody that makes sense. That's fine. That's fair to me. I'm not. I'm sorry to tell you, because you know what happens when tax money is used for things? Your taxes generally go up a little bit. And yes. you and I aren't economists. We're football guys. But again, what I do know about the football side of this thing, will you be that much better of a team? When I think of the stuff that I had when I was in college, I have more stuff than I could imagine in college. And I'm like, what more could you use? When I think about my high school career, we beat the piss out of teams that had facility advantages over us by a mile. I went to one, we had a semifinal game, and their trainer wrapped my wrist in my hands. I never had that before. We didn't have trainers who wrapped your wrist and all that. It was either you just knew somebody who did, or you just didn't have it. And that was it. We didn't become a super team because of that. We were who we were when we walked on that field. And so, I think that this is, again, I get it if you're lagging behind like a Washington State was a few years ago. Their facilities were atrocious. The team like that needed it. I get it if you're talking about a Wake Forest from a football standpoint. They can absolutely close ground on some other Power 4 teams, with all due respect. But some of these teams, it's like, what more do you want? What more do you need? Particularly the two we're talking about in Florida State and Clemson. What more do you want and need?
Coming up next, will the ACC have a Heisman finalist or even a Heisman winner this year, and who's that going to be? Keep it locked right here to Locked On ACC. I already know you're keeping it locked to Monopoly Go. You can not only troll your friends on Monopoly Go, there's a lot of that. You can also team up with your friends for timed tournaments where you work together to build up each other's boards. The more you win together, the more awesome prizes you unlock. And there's so much to get. Unique stickers you can trade with friends to complete albums for big prizes. Cool new playing pieces to travel the boards with. Hilarious emojis for taunting friends when you smash their buildings or heist their vaults. Plus, Monopoly Go feels new and exciting every day with constantly changing tournaments and challenges. A ton include their own unique mini games like digging for treasure or a robot pachinko machine. And there's always new timed events that help you win big, like massive multipliers for everything you win or rent frenzies. There's always something fun to discover in Monopoly Go. So get off the bench and go download it now, free on Google Play or the App Store. Game on. Thanks for making this episode of Locked On ACC your first listen and your first watch today. Alex Donno from Locked On Canes alongside Kenton Gibbs from Locked On Wolfpack. So, Kenton, when you're talking about, not always, but usually when you're talking about a Heisman Trophy winner, there are some exceptions. Jaden Daniels' numbers were so gaudy that he won the trophy over, players that were in the college football playoff. But usually you have to have that magical combination of a team that's contending for a championship and a player that's putting up big numbers on said team. And so that's why I'm wondering if the ACC can produce a Heisman finalist. The Miami homer in me, I obviously have to throw a bid out there. And listen, there could be something behind it, and he's got odds on him and everything. But I wonder if that's a conversation that Cam Ward can put himself in. But whether people acknowledge it or not, Kenton, the Heisman is not strictly an individual award. It in some ways really is a team award, because you not only have to have your supporting cast stepping up and putting up big numbers, and I think Miami has the potential offensive firepower to do that, but for the most part, your team usually needs to be in the 10 or 11 win range. And I think there's a chance Miami could get there, but I am not one to make proclamations like that, because my team has let me down many, many times before. So I will believe it when I see it, right? And then you
absolutely.
think about and so you think about other potential favorites to win the conference. NC State, I give a lot of respect. Do you think Grayson McCall, can he put himself into that conversation? Can DJU at Florida State, who doesn't have the highest ceiling, but he's got a very high floor, as we've talked about, could
I hear you. And I'm going to tell you something. If Cade Klubnik, and I mean this very genuinely, right? Because everybody knows how critical I've been to Cade Klubnik, but I mean this from a very genuine standpoint. If Cade Klubnik improves his decision-making, like immediately, like if he becomes a high-level decision-maker at the college level, he really does have the tools. They really are all there. Like it's a lot like how people talk about J.J. McCarthy, except I don't think that he's quite the decision maker J.J. McCarthy is. I think that he's tool-wise better, but the decision-making is just like, it's tough. Walk me through it. If Johnny had 5 apples type of deal, right? So I that's the deal there. But I will say this. Anybody who comes out of the ACC who ends up in New York, that will be a shock to me. Because if you look at the history of the guys who won it without having super winning teams, they did freakazoid stuff. They did, you talk about Jaden Daniels. The last one before him, I'd probably say, was Lamar Jackson. And Lamar, he did some freakazoid stuff. It was just like, Lamar Jackson was so explosive and so good, he made me happy to be retired, because I'm not going to lie, I was not happy to be medically retired before that. I watched him play against NC State and said, you know what? Ain't the worst thing to do sitting here watching this on the Saturday. I can be out there. I can be out there trying to chase that guy. I'm all right. But in all seriousness, I think that even if I was to go around the conference and say who's the most likely, I'd maybe give the nod to Toafili, because if he carries the mail for an offense that is run game driven, for a team really that's run game driven, and he finds himself at about 1,500 yards or so, maybe more, I think he could maybe find himself in New York. But, other than him, anybody else, you would have to do some astounding things. And there's all the players that I look at in the conference that I would say, man, he's got a shot. he's really got a shot to do it, there's also a underlying sense of there's a major problem here. You want to say Grayson McCall because of the weapons. There's also the major problem that he's a first-year transfer quarterback. Other than Cam Newton, how many first-year transfer Cam Newton and Justin Fields, how many other first-year transfer quarterbacks lit the world on fire? Not many. Not many, regardless of how good the weapons were. So, you look there and then you say, well, Castellanos up at Boston College. Number one, he's at Boston College. Number two, I don't believe in his head coach. Yeah, I don't believe in his head coach. Well, that's another problem there. And so you go up and down the conference. If there is a player, that player is going to have to come out of nowhere. It's going to have to be a guy that nobody saw coming, like one of the guys in the UNC QB battle where it's like, oh, they're starting a young guy. Oh, the quarterbacks keep getting better. They go from Howe to May to this superstar. It's going to have to be something like that because I highly doubt that the guys who are currently in it, I want to say it's like Ward, Martinez, Klubnik, Concepcion, and McCall are the only guys who have fairly high odds.
Concepcion is not a bad shout. Honestly, because a lot of times when you would say, well, and we don't see receivers win it often, but to say, and he's not even just a receiver. The guy does, and I think that's where he could have a chance because usually you'd say, hey, it can't be a receiver because then the quarterback throwing to him is going to supersede him. But in the case of Concepcion, you could definitely have a scenario where he is a bigger part of NC State than Grayson McCall is just because of all of what he does in that offense.
Well, it could happen, but my only problem with Concepcion, I think he could go to New York, but winning it is going to be a problem because he's only a true sophomore. And as much as we don't like to say it, Heisman voters like to do this thing where they're like, oh, he's got another year. Right. Even if he is the best player, I'm not sure if we want to give it to him over this senior who's been good for 3-4 years. And it's just finally his time. We've got to give it to him because he's not going to get another shot. But KC is going to get another shot. So we're not going to give it to him. But in all seriousness, I absolutely think KC is a guy that, I think he's a decent option to go to win. That's a little bit tougher. And plus, there's so much talent in that receiving room now. I don't think that he will be as heavily focused and targeted as he was last year.
Now, real quick, I know this is one you have an opinion on. Who's Defensive Player of the Year going to be in the ACC?
Oh, boy. I hate to say it because nobody's going to believe me, but there's a cornerback in the ACC that has not allowed a touchdown in almost 3 years. This young man has locked up all of the best in the conference that came his way. For whatever reason, he does not get to – well, I get it. He's a cornerback that doesn't follow number one receiver everywhere. But Aiden White is a guy that, to me, he needs to be in consideration for Defensive Player of the Year. And if it's not going to be him, then I'm going with my man, another man in red and white, Ashton Gelati. Book it. Fear the fro, beware the hair. Ashton Gelati is my guy if it's not going to be Aiden White. I love the way he pass rushes. I love the way that he sets the edge and anchors. I love the way they can move him up and down the line because he has that type of versatility and power to rush on the inside as well. My guy, number 9 of the Louisville Cardinals, Ashton Gelati, is going to be Defensive Player of the Year if it's not Aiden White.
We'll leave it right there. We'll talk to you guys Monday. He's Kenton Gibbs from Locked On Wolfpack. I'm Alex Donno from Locked On Canes. We'll talk to you next time on another episode of Locked On ACC, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.